Strawberry Fields Forever is a remarkable song. John Lennon thought it was the finest work that he had done with the Beatles, although he also said it was badly recorded at one point, and he blamed McCartney for sabotaging the recording. A dubious claim, and he told the Beatles producer George Martin that he would like to record again everything which the Beatles had done, because he didn't think any of it had turned out to his satisfaction. And Martin asked him, well, even Strawberry Fields? And Lennon said, especially Strawberry Fields. Quite a remarkable thing to say, given what a spectacularly successful song it has proved to be over many years. Lennon described it as psychoanalysis set to music. And its origins lay in a film venture of John Lennon's. He was in Almeria in Spain filming How I Won the War, directed by Richard Lester. Not an experience that he particularly enjoyed, and he said he was very glad to come back to Britain and to be reunited with the rest of the Beatles. They just stopped touring, and when Lennon wrote the song in 1966, it had been a very difficult time. His great friend, the singer and entertainer Alman Cogan, had just died at the age of 34. He may have had conflicted feelings about giving up touring, although it seems that by then almost all of the Beatles, with the possible exception of Paul McCartney, were quite keen to give up on touring, at least for a spell. But it was a very different phase of his life, and it was in those conditions that he wrote Strawberry Fields Forever. Sitting in Spain, he would have felt a bit distant, a bit dislocated. And it seems that the gates of the property where he was staying may have reminded him of another property back in Liverpool next to where he grew up in Menlove Avenue, the Salvation's Army children's home called Strawberry Fields. We don't know if that's the case, but there are some great pictures of Lennon sitting on his bed in Almeria in Spain. He was sharing the property there with the actor Michael Crawford. He went on to star in Frank Spencer on TV, and we can see him with his acoustic guitar working on the song. Lennon worked to make the lyrics more obscure. Initially, the lyrics talked about how no one else was on his wavelength. That may well have referred to the others involved with the filming, which Lennon did not enjoy. He then made the lyrics a bit more opaque, and of course the lyrics in the finished verses are very disjointed, and it's not entirely clear often what Lennon means, but we get a sense of the sentiment behind it. Paul McCartney said he thought that Lennon had once again been influenced by Lewis Carroll, and in particular his nonsense poem Jabberwocky. I've always felt the opening to the track was a little bit sinister. Let me take you down to Strawberry Fields. And there is something slightly jarring about it, and particularly with the fantastic drums. You expect it to be perhaps another nostalgia trip, a little like In My Life, Lennon's masterpiece from the earlier Rubber Soul album, but it quickly gets into more hallucinatory or dreamlike territory when he starts talking about how nothing is real. LSD definitely was an influence on the song, and Lennon himself might have thought of it as another of his acidy songs, a bit like Tomorrow Never Knows, She Said, She Said. It was the first song that they recorded after Revolver, and the most complex that they had ever attempted on a technical level. It took them 45 hours over 5 weeks, and in the end Lennon said that he wanted 2 takes, versions of the song spliced together. The only problem with that was that they were in different tempos, and of course in those days it was very difficult to splice together pieces of music which were at different tempos. Jeff Emerick, who was George Martin's engineer, eventually found a way to do it by quickening the pace of one section and slowing the pace of the other take, and in that way he could meld them together. Lennon was insistent that that's what he wanted to happen, and he told George Martin, "No, you'll find a way to do it." The lyric also refers to nothing to get hung about, which apparently is a reference to a warning that Lennon used to get from Aunt Mimi, who was his carer for most of his life. She would say, "Don't play in the grounds of Strawberry Fields," and Lennon would say, "Well, they're not going to hang you for it." Nothing to get hung about. We often find this with Lennon, that he will look back to his childhood from a position of great fame and wealth. And in this case, he had a bit of physical distance from the country as well, sitting in Spain, and his thoughts will turn naturally, as they did with In My Life, to his childhood in Liverpool. She Said also talks about when he was a boy, another song influenced by LSD. Paul McCartney did play a part in the writing of it, in the sense that he played the opening notes, that extraordinary opening to the song. And there's no doubt that for Lennon this was an extremely important song, and perhaps one of his most personal. The Beatles in the early part of their career had written love songs. You got the sense that lyrics were not an overriding priority by this point. They've gone in a completely different direction. Paul McCartney was inspired to write Penny Lane after hearing Strawberry Fields. So it wouldn't have existed, perhaps, without Strawberry Fields. Both writers were very interested in going back to their roots in Liverpool.